Hey everyone, it's Steven. I wanted to make a video today on education and ChatGPT, specifically higher education and ChatGPT, and maybe more broadly, artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence is going to shape uh, education and higher education. I'm coming from a higher education um, background, and also maybe how artificial intelligence will shape education for our students. And if you're a parent, how it will shape education for your children. If this topic interests you, I'm going to be getting into it in a lot more detail in this video. And it's been a while since I've made a video, but I really felt compelled today after a couple of presentations at my university on artificial intelligence and education. So I really wanted to make this video as a in discussion of that, maybe. That we didn't get to ask questions after that session, so maybe this is me venting a little bit. But the topic is an interesting one, and it's a topic that has been on my mind as a literature teacher. I've taught Mary Shelley's Frankenstein for a long time, and it was in a literature class that a student asked me. In this literature class, I was teaching. This was a couple of years ago. I was teaching. We were reading some philosophy about animal ethics side by side with some fiction about animal ethics. And I had a student come up to me afterward, and I detailed some of this in an Instagram video, and I'll include it in the notes for the video, the link to that, so you can see a little more what that student was telling me. But the student came up to me and asked me, Professor C, given that reading philosophy about animal ethics and how we should treat animals doesn't actually make people better about how they behave, why should we read this stuff at all? Why does having an animal ethic matter at all if we know, or if it's been shown that it doesn't actually make people want to behave better when it comes to animals? And this student, she'd stumped me for a little bit, and I wasn't sure how to respond to it. And then the thought came to me, well, I think the reason we need an animal ethic, even if we don't, it doesn't necessarily change our behavior in relation to animals. It's a good intellectual exercise for, in the event, this is what I told her at the time, and this was before any of this artificial intelligence stuff had really gotten off the ground, is I said to her, in the event we're no longer the top dog, or we're no longer the top intelligence on Earth, I said, we need a compelling reason to give whatever that superior intelligence is. We need a compelling reason to give that higher intelligence for not basically wiping us out, for not treating us like cattle, essentially. And without that reasoning and thinking, that reasoning and thinking might not persuade a higher intelligence anyway, because that higher intelligence might be amoral anyway. But assuming that higher intelligence responds to logic and reason, we need something to tell that higher intelligence about why it shouldn't just wipe us out. And that thinking, or that answer I gave to that student, probably back in 2017, 2018, was brought into had been brought to the fore for me with this discussion of artificial intelligence and education. And when this topic of ChatGPT or artificial intelligence and education comes up, I feel like there are two camps that usually emerge in this conversation, and I don't know if it divides exactly along department lines, where the sort of STEM and math people think a certain way, and then the humanities and lit people think another way. But it seems like it might, and maybe as a humanities person, you might already suspect the arguments I'm going to make. But the argument I'm going to make is one that I haven't heard many people make. In fact, I've heard a lot of the arguments that STEM folks make being used by people in the humanities as a way of just sort of throwing up their hands and saying, well, artificial intelligence is here. We have to sort of figure out how to deal with it. And that argument goes something like this, and it's one that was made in the presentation that I saw at my university today. And the argument is that, well, there are two arguments. One is it's inevitable, and what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do anyway? So we might as well figure out how to deal with it. And that to me is a weak argument, especially because if we're at universities and we're trying, especially a liberal arts university where we're trying to change the world and shape the world, saying something like, well, it's going to inevitable, so we might as well just throw up our hands anyway, seems like a cop-out. But the other argument that I think has more traction is this idea that technology is neutral. Technology can be used for good and bad. And then people will say things like, well, I mean, people freaked out when the computer came out, when the internet was a thing, and people Y2K, there was this Y2K hysteria, and everybody was panicking, and so people can use the internet for bad things. People can use the internet for good things. This is the same thing with artificial intelligence. People are going to be panicking about it now, but trust me, in 10 years, people will still be using it for bad, but we can also use it for good. That's how the reasoning goes, and I think there's some weight to that. I'm not dismissing that flippantly. I think there's some on the surface, at least, I think that makes some sense. Where I think that breaks down is as follows, and I'll lay it out for you. And this is what I told you. I don't think I've heard many people say what I'm about to say, or I haven't heard it spelled out exactly the way I'm going to lay it out for you. In this presentation that I was sitting in, the presenter, there were 3 presenters, and all of them were from STEM fields, which I leaned over to a humanities colleague of mine, and I said, "Oh, this is a coincidence." But the point this presenter made was people who got their PhDs or who did schooling before there was the internet had to go to libraries and look at books, use the Dewey Decimal System, and they look at people who got their degrees when the internet had widely penetrated universities, and they see and they kind of they'll use the refrain that the older generation always uses, which is, back in my day, we had to go to the library and crack open books and smell dust in the library, and you guys could just sit on your computers and download stuff and read it. And so similarly, the presenter's point was that similarly, we're going to be the generation that is not AI native like the students who are coming up now. We're going to look at that and see it as this newfangled thing that is is a shortcut in thinking, which is how the book people looked at the internet people. And like I said, that it's related to that point I made about it's just a technology. It's just like the internet and computers. It'll be used for good. It'll be used for bad. Where I think this analogy doesn't hold is as follows. I think underlying artificial intelligence is a morality that is, I don't want to say antagonistic, that's a little harsh, is skeptical of humanity. I mean, maybe maybe that's not so harsh. Antagonistic to humanity. And here's what I mean by that. I don't think technology is neutral. I think that is not accurate. It's not simply the case that we invent things without blindly. Inventions don't blindly pop into existence. Technology doesn't blindly pop into existence. Human beings manifest technology. Many authors and philosophers have written about this. I'd I can recommend some to you in the notes if you want, or if you leave me some comments down below, and I can recommend a couple of essays to you about this. But technology doesn't pop blindly into existence. We have values as humans, and those values then manifest in the things we make and things we want to use. And so to say that, well, yeah, technology is neutral, to me is misguided. Technology is steered by certain values that we have. And the argument I would make is that the values and ethics that steer the internet and computers are not necessarily the same as the values that steer artificial intelligence. When it comes to book learning versus learning online, both of those technologies, books and computers, still require the mediation of putting things into your head, right? Whether I go to the library, crack open a book, read it, absorb it into my brain, and now I know it, or I go online, download a PDF, read it. In both of those cases, I'm still absorbing the information, and I'm still learning. In the case of the library book, it's taking me longer. I have to use the Dewey Decimal System. My library might not have the book, whereas the internet, it's interconnected all over the place. I'll probably have wider access. So the ease and convenience of the internet, I think, is why people who got their degrees when they haven't used the Dewey Decimal System, I think they go, it was so much harder. I had to go and actually go to the library. But in both cases, there was still the mediation of the person that was required. They still had to absorb that information, whether it was through the screen or through the book. With artificial intelligence, it's not the same thing. To me, artificial intelligence, the goal of artificial intelligence is not to aid learning and aid human projects. It's to replace human projects. Think about the ethic that underlies a kind of technology that can write its own music, can write its own poetry. That is not a value neutral technology. That technology is brought into being by a consciousness that doesn't place much value on a human written sonnet, a human written symphony. The ethic that underlies that is someone who thinks I could eradicate that. I could do without that. Right? I can create it without the need of a person. Okay? So in the meantime, while this artificial intelligence isn't perfect, we can, as educators, I think we could still use it as a teaching tool in the classroom. And this is what some of the STEM folks were saying, is that we can use it with our students. We can look at the mistakes it makes and then correct it as a class and have that be a collective effort that we do in class. But I don't think we should make the mistake. I don't think we should not see where this trajectory is going. The trajectory is eventually this thing will not make mistakes, and even if it is making mistakes, we don't have anything higher to check it against, because this is what we're using. The only reason we can, as a classroom, I can use it as a teaching tool is because someone, the teacher or some other book, knows better than the technology. But what happens when that is the way that we verify information and check information, and it's the only way? Then we've eliminated the need for human thinking and human intelligence and human innovation. And so I'm deeply skeptical of inviting artificial intelligence into the academy, just because I see that in the short term it might be something that we can use as a teaching tool. Long term, though, it's clear to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, it's clear to me at least that the trajectory is going to be one of replacing human thinking, not aiding human thinking. Can it be used now in the short term to aid human thinking? Yeah, because it's not perfect, and it still makes mistakes. A lot of mistakes, actually. But the progress of it is to get better and better, and eventually to not need human thinking anymore. And in response to that, I've heard people say things along the lines of, well, if there'll still be, in this future where robots, artificial intelligence is writing symphonies, writing poetry, there'll still be people doing it, and people who have an appetite for human written poetry, human written symphonies will still seek those out. Probably true, but we shouldn't forget that technology also shapes the way we think, right? Neil Postman, who's a great author, has this idea that technology isn't. It's not the case that we have society and then we just add on technology and it's additive, right? We add the technology on and then it changes society. So it's not just the case that we are that the 1980s happened, then the 90s happened, we add the internet, and then it's the 1990s now plus the internet. No, the internet changes the way society is, such that now we can't even imagine doing business, interacting without the internet. So it's not the case that you just have society stays the same and you just add on technologies. That's not the case. So as we start to allow artificial intelligence to do more, especially when it comes to the arts and humanities, that's going to change the way we think about those things, such that most people, if that's how they're getting their art and their information, will no longer value human avenues for that stuff. And to which maybe the STEM people would say, I don't want to say the STEM people as if they all think as a monolith. They don't. But to which the supporters of artificial intelligence would say, well, if people stop valuing the human versions of that, well, then maybe it's not so valuable anyway. And I don't know, that's just not a world I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world where where humans aren't connected. That's not a pleasant future for me to imagine. I mean, sometimes I think when people have thoughts about artificial intelligence writing music, writing poetry, writing novels, sometimes I wonder if these people who endorse these kinds of things, whether they, why it is that they read novels. And this goes back to what I was saying before about the underlying ethic is antithetical to humanity. Because the reason I read novels, the reason I listen to music, is because I want to know that when I'm taking in that art, I'm interfacing with another person. When I read Hemingway, I'm looking at my bookshelf, when I read Dostoevsky, when I read Lydia Davis, when I read Mary Gordon, professor of mine from college, grad school, when I read these people, I know that I'm interfacing with them on the page. Who or what am I interfacing with when I read an AI novel or an AI sonnet? It feels very one-sided. And I don't know that having society continue to trend in a one-sided direction is a good thing. I think dialogue is better than monologue, and it seems like AI is taking us in a direction of it seems to be motivated by just antipathy for humanity, or it doesn't see much value in human achievement. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I'd love to hear people's thoughts down below. But I don't see a future for this in the academy. I don't think I don't think it's a good thing long term. I think I put it this way on Twitter the other day, that I think we are inviting the fox into the hen house by doing this. Um, I think universities feel a lot of pressure to stay modern, because their students are modern and they're using these technologies uncritically in most cases, and we need to feel like we are speaking the language of the students that we're serving. But I certainly, after looking at this, I mean, and experimenting with some of the technology myself, I applaud some of the universities who are getting out ahead of it and saying this is antithetical to just the values of liberal arts and the humanities in general. I mean, I don't know how much clearer the technology is telling you it's artificial intelligence. So technology is, I mean, clearly it doesn't value human intelligence, because it's trying to replace it and replicate it to replace it ultimately. And so I applaud those universities who have gotten out ahead of it and said we can't do this. I'll just close with this thought. The irony of the two presentations I saw today at my university. One was about artificial intelligence, and then the other one was about how do we save the humanities? How do we save the liberal arts? And it didn't seem that anyone recognized that these two ideas had anything to do with each other. I said to a colleague of mine, like, I mean, we're talking about what we can do to save the liberal arts. Maybe a better question is, what should we not do to help the liberal arts? I think the thing we should not do is invite into the academy something that is guided by an ethic that is just antithetical to human endeavor, human achievement, and human potential. It's there so that it can replicate in order to replace, and I just don't see that ending well for students, for professors, and just for society in general. Like I said, I just see this trending more and more in the direction of monologue instead of dialogue. Okay, let me know what you think down below. I have some strong thoughts about this, but I am open to hearing more. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. I'm a humanities person, so if there are maybe safeguards or ways of doing artificial intelligence in a way that kind of preserves some of those those human imperatives that I was talking about, the desire for humans to connect, whether it's in real teaching or in the arts where humans are connecting. If there are ways of building that into the AI itself, I'm open to learning, and I'd love to hear that stuff. Thanks for sitting here and listening to my thoughts, and I'll see you in another video.